Hello everybody, today we're taking a look at the Eachine VisWhoop. Of course it comes with 6 prop guards, but they're going to break right away. Of course the star of the show is the Caddx Vista, which features an HD camera and VTX and receiver all in one stack here. The all-in-one board features an F411 flight controller, a 12-amp 4-in-1 ESC with a continuous peak of 15 amps for 5 seconds. It also has a receiver built into that single board. In this case, it's FrSky. The motors are 1204 5000 kV. The props are Gemfan 2540s. I'm getting about 130 millimeters motor post to motor post. The single bottom plate is 2.5 millimeters thick. The top carbon plate looks to be 1.5 millimeters thick. Arm thickness looks to be a little over 6 millimeters. Here's a look at the carbon weave, and the arms are very, very flexible. It weighs 103.5 grams. With the 4 prop guards and their nylon stands off, it weighs just about 118 grams. I flew it on this G&B 650 milliamp 3S battery. With the prop guards, it brings it up to 178 grams. Without the prop guards, it's almost 164 grams. So we don't have the most scenic day, but it is HD FPV. This has been a dream for many people. I've narrated this a few times, and I'm kind of struggling with anything that I can say that's positive about this. I think after going through my narration and throwing it out a few times and making additional notes, the only reason I can see anybody would buy this is because that you really want to get a quad that's ready to fly that has the Caddx Vista HD video system in it. And you're willing to sacrifice flight characteristics, flight performance. It seems a bit awkward to me because buying the DJI goggles is expensive. You can fly this one with a stock FrSky radio if that's what you have, or any of the other receivers that you see on the product page that are listed, because it's all built into that board, which is interesting. They have a 12-amp all-in-one board with a receiver built into it as well. We've seen that in much smaller boards, but not nearly as high of rating. Also, a VTX has been built into that one as well. We'll see more on that later. I've got something that I might be able to show you down the road. From what I have seen or heard of when it comes to ready to flies and the DJI HD video system, I just don't think this is a very good candidate. I think you need to look at something else. You may sacrifice flight time. That's one thing I can say about this one is I flew it with a 650 milliwatt battery, and the flight time is going to be quite long. You can look at the timeline within YouTube to measure that for yourself, but my recollection is it's somewhere around almost 4 minutes. But it just doesn't fly very well. I spent weeks and weeks tuning this. You've seen other videos probably on it that came out maybe a month or so ago. I was hopeful that I could salvage the tune or something, but I just kind of had to give up the ghost. And so I reset everything back to defaults after taking a dump of Betaflight, and we're back to square one. So I spent a lot of time trying to improve this and just didn't. I mean, it's an enjoyable experience. Don't get me wrong. Flying in this sort of video quality is really great, and having the clarity and the range that you have is really impressive. I can fly all over my neighborhood. I don't know. I've flown it. You might remember that VTX test I did where I flew around my neighbor's house, which I've only been able to do on 400 milliwatts. Of course, this is running 700 milliwatts, but you could do that and more with this system. It just works so well, but there is a high cost to having that. So that's something that we all have to be prepared for. If you haven't seen it already, that punch out I did over the house, the first time I did that was a little bit of a panic moment because it was really hard to get the nose to come down. It was a really strange sensation that the nose just didn't want to go down. And once I got it down, then it started to flutter a little bit in the air. And I didn't know if I was going to have a desync or if I had a broken prop or a broken arm or something awkward was going on there. But it was a panic experience there the first time I did that. And so I only did it once in this video as just kind of a proof of concept to show you how it can fly in more of a speed or aggressive style of format. I'll show a sample of the cruising. In the cruising flight, you'll see to where there's moments where the footage is nice and stable and it doesn't bobble, and then there are moments where it just won't stop bobbling and it's not stable. So, and I couldn't figure out a way around that. I think it flies better without the prop guards, and the prop guards are going to break right away. Just as I said in the quick roll, I actually broke 2 of my prop guard spurs or spars, what have you, the parts that come from the motor out to the actual round prop guard part on a landing. Not a hard landing. I actually flew it in and landed, and it tipped over because the battery, I did fly it with the battery on the bottom. It tipped over after disarming and cracked 2 of them, and I'll show that to you here at the desk. So those prop guards, they're not going to provide you any safety or they're going to provide you any protection for your props or your arms or anything like that. wouldn't be able to say whether the carbon would break or not. It may just fold, it may delaminate. It's just very flexible carbon, and that makes getting a consistent motor prop position out of it as it flies through the air very, very difficult. At least that's what I'm surmising after trying to tune this for many weeks. For me, I'm going to end up taking the components and probably putting them on another frame. That's the only value I can see. If you can't get a unit or a quad that has the Vista system in it otherwise, then you have to buy this to transfer it into a frame that you do want to fly it in, something that's got nice stiff carbon. But that's the quick flight. Let's go into a cruising sample. Pretty overcast days you see here, and it's just inconsistent. I mentioned it in the faster flight. It's just inconsistent. There's seemingly no rhyme or reason. Wind direction, it just kind of wants to bobble every once in a while, and it makes me crazy that I spent so much time. I'm sure there's got to be a half dozen reviews on this already. I was hopeful that we could salvage it because I had gotten some messages from people asking me if I had this, and that if I had, you know, my thoughts on it together, and I was like, I'm not very pleased with things right now. I'm trying to make things work a little bit better. I just couldn't. I was hopeful, but I couldn't. I thought that was something that I could add value to the community through finding the tune that works well for this system. But the tune that they've got on there works as well as it can for what it is. A flexible carbon, possibly underpropped, too heavy quad. And the weight, I don't want to hammer on the weight too much because you can't make it much lighter when you're trying to get this X Vista HD video system going. There's just not a whole lot of weight to cut. The prop guards are one area you can cut, and it does improve it, but it's not going to make that much of a difference. I just don't think, unless you're wanting to do this sort of cruising flat style of flight, you probably didn't even see me do a flip or a roll in that flight, because even getting that to where it's tight or smooth, it just won't. It can't do many of the things that we commonly want out of a quad. So if you're looking for a quad that's not acrobatic, that's not aggressive in speed or flight characteristics, then maybe, I guess. I'm really struggling, if you can't tell, I'm really struggling to come up to find a way to where anyone would want this, outside of it having the HD video system in it. Otherwise, it's just probably money. You're going to end up spending more money replacing the frame that it comes on, and then you might not be happy with the motor prop size, and possibly the ESC will be underrated for what motors you decide to go with. It's got a lot of things that stop me from thinking that anyone can possibly want this. And when I look at who anyone might be, I try to think of all the people that have come and left comments, and we've had those conversations in the comment section, because one of my biases, obviously, is looking for a quad that I want. I like to fly in a particular way, and that's the kind of quads I'm looking for. But not everybody is me. Some people like to go out and cruise. They like to explore. Some people like to do a lot of flips and flops and all the aerobatics and tricks. Some people want, super powerful machines that you fly in much bigger spaces than mine. Other people want slower machines that can fly in smaller places than mine. But so those are the things I'm thinking about when I talk about who might want this. It's not that I'm trying to sell it, it's that I'm struggling to find a reason that anybody would want to get this. So other than me rambling on and on in that flight video showing you what it really, I guess, kind of flies like, I know this is kind of a depressing video. I try not to be depressing. The battery weight, if you didn't note that in the quick roll, you should go back if you're looking at this in any capacity. I think you're going to find that going with a heavier battery, even the same size of battery, could end up being heavier. That's going to be important to the flight characteristics. Yours probably won't compare to mine if you go to a heavier battery, because I found heavier batteries flew worse. They did give you more flight time because there's more milliamp in there, but they didn't fly as well as far as taking coordinated turns or even just cruising around. More weight, it got worse. As far as the construction goes, yeah, when you take the prop guards off, it's pretty awkward. You've got a hole here and a hole here on every arm to secure the prop guards down. They have these nylon standoffs in them, and then some screws that go in there. I didn't even go into what comes into the kit. You do get some extra stuff here, some extra prop screws. the various bag that you get with Eachine stuff all the time. There were a few extra zip ties and some heat shrink in there as well as kind of a manual get started sort of guide. And these are fairly decent. You know, they're not written by someone who probably speaks English natively. It might be proofed by someone who does, but they do a relatively decent job of helping you get started. The mounting for the antenna I wasn't crazy about, but you know, you can see I doubled it up to kind of get some crisscross action to kind of firm this up a little bit because it was just sticking out the back and it was kind of flopping around. I did that because I wanted to firm up as much as I could to stop any vibrations from going from some extremity into the flight controller. So I wanted to firm this up. I even wanted to firm my antennas up. So I took one of those zip ties, I cut it in half, I poked it through this TPU print back here, and I put some heat shrink of my own on it to kind of keep these from wiggling around. I made sure that everything was secured down. Of course, I did my battery lead securing down here as well. In this particular case, because the USB port is right next to the battery pads, I did have to kind of make sure that it came down below the USB port, make sure I had access. The cable for the Vista camera is all secured in there. I didn't have any problems with that coming out. Another thing that I didn't care for when it comes to this carbon, I think it's on this side. So there's a little cap right down in here, and this is a metal screw that runs through here. So if you're top mounting your battery and you crash and you come down on that battery, this flexes enough. See how this area, when I push down, doesn't move that much, it stops. There's a capacity for that screw to hit that cap and then cause you problems with your flight controller. I don't know how well you could see that. I guess you have to trust me to a certain degree. But that flex that we have in here, that's not good either. That's just another thing that, you know, as you fly through the air, there's going to be little micro vibrations because of all the flexibility within this carbon. I'm not certain what kind of filament this is. This looks like a print to me. It doesn't look like it's molded. I didn't have any problems with this. It does not provide you any true camera protection, so I don't see any point to it being rounded. At no point, if you center a tree, a pole, or a post, or anything that's even wider than this, is it actually going to protect your camera. So it's could be replaced for just traditional standoffs if that's what you wanted to do. If you are buying this quad, I would get longer standoffs than what comes stock with it, so you can get some separation between the air unit as well as your flight controller there. They do have the tape that I like, that Emax tape. I'm sure it has another name, but it's got Emax tape. This board is kind of interesting and it's kind of awkward, just because the length of the wire that you need. You can see how typically we would have a connector here, and we'd have our connectors kind of both right here on this side, or we'd have them both up front. We'd have two connectors close together rather than on the corners as you see here. It's just a little bit of an oddity with this particular board. Let's see what else. Of course, we've got these Phillips headed screws all over the place. We've got hex here, hex in our motors. What about the top? We've got Phillips up here, here, and then we've got hex back here. And going back to the bottom to talk about the Phillips headed screws, I put a gummy pad on there because these screws do stick out a little bit. I didn't want my battery bonking into those on every landing. You can see that I cut down my battery strap. It's ridiculously long. They have pictures showing a battery on top as well as a GoPro Session, I believe, and I think that's kind of a ridiculous combination. I can't imagine that it flies well at all. I think your footage would be really unusable if you put that much load on this. I'm not talking about flight characteristics. I'm talking about all those bobbles and weaves that you see in the image when I was just cruising around. I think that would get worse the more load you put in there, because my experience with adding a heavier battery was that it got worse. And I'm sure other people in their videos, hopefully they have said something similar, that the heavier the battery, the worse the flight characteristics get. Yeah, I guess the only positive thing I could say is the Caddx Vista DJI HD video system works great. It's wonderful, but that's $150 by itself versus buying it with the quad like this, which is $248. You don't get any batteries with it. You do get a case to put the quad. So there it is. There's my review. I can't say anything that I think is very positive about this. I apologize if I am bringing you down. That's not what I like to do in this hobby. I did enjoy the experience of using the DJI system. I just don't think there's a reason to buy this for really anyone. If you can come up with a reason, I'm all ears. I'm curious on what your rationale is for someone wanting to buy a quad that flies generally pretty poor and doesn't give you great HD footage because of those flight characteristics, when you can just buy the Vista unit and put it in something else that probably does fly pretty well. So if you've got an idea on why someone would buy it, let me know in the comment section down below. And if you have any other comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in that section down below. I appreciate your time, and thank you for watching.